Hello and welcome to Spirit Sherpa, the show that helps and encourages you on your journey to unlock your magic mojo. I'm Joshua Radewan, your co-host, here as always with transformational shaman and spiritual coach, Kelle Sparta. What's going on, Kelle? See, that
Hey,
was kind of
Josh.
in line, you know. I know we're changing it up a little bit. We're just kind of going with the flow here in the feminine work. So
Yep. Well, you're on walkabout. I'm buying a business. It's all stuff. Transition,
business.
transformation, right? That's sort of our core foundation here.
Oh
So
Lord, isn't it?
that's what I said. So before I forget, I was talking with another coach recently, and they said that they were having a hard time. They were saying things were taking a long time to do, and that there was a lot of stuff. They were feeling overwhelmed by the activity in their group, right? And so I spoke with them, and I was like, okay, so there really isn't that much activity. So what's going on? And they said that they were just feeling like they were monitoring everybody all the time, right? Energetically monitoring everyone. And I said, okay, that's your problem. Like, I don't energetically monitor. Well, I do, but I very specifically only energetically monitor my people in one way. And so, everybody, I've got a little tendril into all my people, and it is an emergency valve. It says, poke me if there's an emergency, right? Poke me if there's a problem. I do not monitor their emotions and stuff every single day, all day long, because that is too much, right? And so I wanted to mention it on air. I wanted to mention it to you because, you run some of my programs. But also I wanted to mention it on air in case there's another coach out there who's doing spiritual work with their people and is getting overwhelmed with a small number of people, and it's like, not so much as, do not be actively monitoring your people all the time. That is, one, inappropriate, and two, it'll make you crazy.
I've always got to ask this question. Is this one of those things that you've learned the hard way personally as well? Because it is definitely one of the things I've came to you with advice about.
Yeah, so yes, it came from a retreat that I went to and I was actively involved in. It was called Spiral, and I was on the ritual team for the first time ever back in, this had to be like 2003, 2004. I don't know. But I was on the ritual team for the first time, and when I came in, we all set the container together, but I couldn't find the container. And so I just kind of set my own, right? And because I couldn't, when I tapped in, I couldn't find it. And I'm like, I don't know where you guys are doing this. I can't find it, right? And then it was the first time I had worked an event that was a multi-day event. So it would have been fine if it had been one day. But it was a multi-day, and it was a sleepover. And so I did not sleep that night or several nights after, because I had everybody in my energy field and I was monitoring everyone. And I was like, Kathy saved me. Kathy's the person who saved me from that one, because she was on the ritual team, and I looked at her, I'm like, how are you sleeping? And she's like, how are you tapped in? She's like, you're supposed to create the container and then disconnect from it. And I was like, nobody told me that. But in the interim,
aha moment. Neil. Oh, hold on. It's like, let me do something on air real quick while you're talking.
to be honest. So, what I will say is that I've modified that, though, because what I found was during the days that I was tapped into the container and they weren't, I knew where everybody was in their process and they didn't. And so, we had come to a point where they were like, okay, we're going to go do this next. And I'm like, they are not ready for that. We need to do something in between. And they were like, no, it's fine. And we've set it up. I'm like, I'm telling you, they're not ready, because I feel it, right? Because I'm tapped in, because I'm holding the damn container 24/7, because I'm an idiot, right? I could feel it, right? So, the thing that's different now is I don't create the container and then completely separate from it. Well, I do. I do pull back, but I also taste the container periodically to tell me how the group is doing, right? So there's the difference.
I've definitely had a recent experience with this. Like I have been coaching some of my own programs in addition to yours, which yours are already kind of set up, in a way, and I just kind of already just tap into that morphic field.
Yeah.
So creating it my own without really knowing the full energetic architecture in which you use, it has definitely been a trial and error. Like recently, first, as a coach, I would say that I have learned more about the martyr syndrome kind of related to that. Like I had people that were done with the material and needed to move on, and I couldn't let them go. And then I realized I
Mhm.
was holding them back.
Yeah.
But I was holding them very, yeah, not holding them really tight. I knew that there was more work and it was hard for me to let them go while I know that they were still kind of in process, right? And knowing that the process doesn't stop me from that empathic nature and being like, "Oh, I can help this." And that's where I was attaching too deeply, right?
Yeah.
Because I was monitoring very deeply and
Yeah.
because I care. But that's that it's something, it's live and learn, right? I think, you've taught me a lot about allowing people to have their process, and that's not yours to hold.
Yeah.
And
Well,
that's
and it's also disempowering, right? So, there's a difference between being a guide and being someone who wants to pick them up and carry them. Right? If you're trying to pick them up and carry them, that's disempowering because you're atrophying their muscles of being able to do it themselves, right? And you're also telling them that they're not capable of doing it themselves because you're doing it and you're the one who knows, right? And so there's that's the challenge, right? So as coaches, we sometimes, especially in the beginning, we get invested. This happened to me a lot in the beginning. You get invested in somebody's outcome because that's how you find your value, right? And so, learning how to internalize your own value, which is, what we do in Woo Squared. But learning how to do that keeps you from doing that and makes you a better coach because then you're empowering people to make their own choices and to take steps forward, and you're just providing the motivation at times, and you're providing the guide on the path. That's what a good coach does, and pointing out insights for them. That's really what a good coach does. And that's a tough thing to get to as a coach because you're all bound up in wanting to do it right and get it done and get the results and make sure that they love you, right? Because we're looking for our value and are getting love from our clients and stuff. And it gets very fraught emotionally.
I think the piece I've struggled with the most is being on, in the deeper level work with you, and then, like coaching 5 years behind, but it's not really 5 years behind because we're doing 20 years of work. And I do my best to, okay, this is where I was at when I was starting this, but also everybody's not me and can, like go through all of that. Like,
Right.
like there was a lot of upending to get to certain places. And, like certain people are built for certain things and some it's like, and that's where the monitoring thing, I think I'm hyper vigilant with a little bit much, but I guess that really has kind of dropped off in the last month. Like I really started to take a look at that. I'm like, okay, I am definitely getting a piece of my value and self-worth from this, and it was actually integration week, which to the hardest lessons for me. It's like do nothing.
You're
I'm like,
welcome.
okay. Yeah. You would think that would be the one, like that would be like, oh, I don't gotta do anything. I'm like, my whole life is doing something.
Yes.
That
Yeah. So
so
for those of you who don't know, integration week is when you are to do no spiritual work. You don't do your daily practices, you don't consume any new content, you aren't working on something, you're just being. And being is its own state of work. But yeah, but the idea is to allow it to settle within you, to allow yourself to receive and settle into whatever has shown up for you in the previous, couple months. So in my programs, there's a set period of time. It's like, okay, it's integration week. Go away. right? Sit down, do nothing, allow things to integrate. Yeah.
For what it's worth, I don't think I did any integration weeks until the tail end of those program.
I'm not surprised to hear that.
Oh, there's just so many funny things. Like, she calls out everything she knows you're going to be in resistance to. And I'm like, I'm going to resist it anyway. So,
I've often said the most stubborn students are the ones who make the best magicians.
ta-da.
Hello. Yeah. Yeah, I nobody gave me integration weeks when I was coming up through, and I would have definitely been the resistor to those two because I wouldn't have known what to do with myself. I'd been like, but I'm not doing. I have to be doing. How can I not?
But they are just some of the most powerful,
Yes.
places where you get the rest so you can recalibrate, like get your ready
Yes.
for the next beat instead of just going, headlong into
That's
it.
the goal. Yeah.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, it's one of those things. A lot of the workshops that I've gone to over the years, a lot of the programs I've attended, have the very Western world drive, breakthrough, drive, no break, zero break. And I'm like, you got to lay down and rest after some of this drive stuff. The drive is a lot of freaking work. And so at some point, you got to lay the fuck down.
So
lay the fuck down and lay like one of my favorite guilty pleasure movies is Pretty Woman, and there's a line in there, it's like, veg out, lay like broccoli, right? Like, I love that.
That's so funny, actually, because I just got back to my home state from walkabout after hitting 30 states. And I got here, and I've been on a hammock for like 8 hours over the last 2 days, and I literally was kissing the earth. Like, I just want to ground into space for something more than 3 days. Like, I can't move anymore. I just need some roots.
Trust me, I understand. I
I
did
know
a
you did.
year without any down in there, so I feel you.
Yeah.
Okay, so, but that's not what we came onto the podcast.
All right, we got something brand new coming
We
for
have a
you.
whole other topic planned. What were we talking? Oh, right, we were talking about chakra clearing. That's what it was. We're going to talk
Yes.
about chakra clearing today. So, I figured we'd start with a little advanced stuff and then go back to the more beginner stuff because, that's how we roll over here. Anyway, so I hear a lot about, and this goes back again to Elizabeth. Elizabeth has been the queen of topics for this podcast, and you are my woman. Thank you so much. And so she had suggested talking about how to heal your chakras. And she actually suggested a sound healing on clearing and healing your chakras. And I wanted to talk about that because there's a lot of discussion in the community about healing your chakras and clearing them and whatnot. And what I find is that I don't see if I do energy healing work on people, I might see something in a particular chakra and things like that. And when we do the seer readings, we're actually looking in the chakras and there are actual blocks in there, right? But they're not blocks that you heal through energy work. They're blocks that you heal through inner work, and that's different, right? And every time, so I used to bring people in and I did Reiki and other, whatever intuitive healing I was doing at the time. And I, when I worked on them, inevitably it was almost never that a block was in the chakra that didn't require me to talk to the client to clear it, right? And there was some sort of belief structure or pattern or knowledge or something that they discovered in the process of doing that work that evolved into the chakra clearing for them, right? And I'm a big fan of energy work, especially in the beginning of your process, because your energy field is kind of bound up and filled with ick, right? Because you've had your trauma and whatever else. I mean, almost nobody gets through life without trauma, right? So, whatever levels or type of trauma you've had, the car accident, whatever, it could be anything, right? And so I'm a big fan of people getting energy work in the beginning of their process. And, midway through, I was still getting some energy work done. Now I almost never get energy work done, right? Because I'm monitoring my own field and I'm like, oh, I feel off. What's going on? And I can fix it myself, right? And that's the goal, right? When you're doing this work, the goal is for you to end up at a place where you can do 99% of your own stuff, because that makes you a fully empowered sovereign being, right? And so, but in the beginning, you don't know jack. You don't know anything, and you got a bunch of crap going on in your energy field. So getting energy work done is really useful. And so, don't try to get to the end. Take the help where you need it, right? Now, chakra healing. Let's talk about that, because there's this belief structure that, like these sound healing, chakra healings and clearings and whatever. Do they work? Yes. Generally, it's temporary. Okay. It's generally very temporary. And so I tell people, I'm like, if you're going to be paying for energy healing work, you should be doing your inner work, because, the energy work is there to supplement the inner work, not supplant the inner work. Right. Because the blocks are there because you have belief structures that made them exist there. Okay. And the belief structures don't move unless you move them. And so you can clear that chakra till the cows come home, and the belief structure will recreate the block, right? And so this is why I'm like dubious about chakra clearings, right? Because they're based in belief structure stuff. Now, there are exceptions to this, right? So the general fluff and buff clearing your chakras, which I call it fluff and buff, just like the massages that are not, digging in and digging out the knots. They're just like, oh, I feel soothed and relaxed. But, 5 minutes later, you're going to walk out into the world. It's going to stress you out again. And boom, you're going to not be relaxed anymore. Right. It's the same idea with the chakra clearing, because you're not addressing the underlying issue. Right. You got to get the knots out. Right. So, with the general fluff and buff chakra clearing, that's something I'm like, if you're really super stressed and you just need a break from everything for a little bit, okay, fine, go ahead and do it. But know that it will be temporary, right? And unless you're doing the inner work. And then there's another type of chakra clearing, because Josh, you and I were talking about this recently, right? Because you've been working on your crown chakra.
I have.
Yeah.
I have a golden hamster wheel up there for my mind on overdrive. He never falls off.
Yeah. So the thing about when you get deeper into your work, right? When you're doing work at a very deep level, and that's the level Josh is at this point in his journey, you begin to see patterns in your chakras sometimes, not often, but sometimes, that you're like, ooh, yeah, that might be a structural issue in the chakra. And that my belief structures have been in place that way for so long that it's undermined the structural integrity of the chakra, right? And, if you add to that any spiritual attacks you may have received and things like that, they can add to especially with the crown chakra, they can add to the problem, right? And so that level of chakra clearing and healing is a more significant level, because you're working at that point, you're working already on your belief structures, but now you're dealing with the structural integrity of the chakra, right? And so the older you get, the more often you'll find structural integrity issues, because you've held belief structures for longer, right? And so the structural integrity issues are definitely things that have to be fixed energetically. The belief structures, if you clear the belief structures, 99% of your energy blocks in your chakras will clear themselves automatically. They don't need energy work to clear them. Okay. But in the very beginning, it's sort of like your system gets swampy if you don't have good energy flow through it, right? And in the beginning, you want to clear the swamp. You're not clearing the chakras as much as the swamp, right? And the chakras, once the swamp is cleared, the chakras kind of clear themselves, as long as you have the crown and the root open. The tree meditation does wonders for everything else, right? It automatically clears a lot of stuff. But Yeah, that when you're starting to do structural work on a chakra, now you're looking at the structure of the chakra itself, not necessarily the block within it, but the structure itself. And you had talked about it being cracked and, sort of
It
weird.
was like it was a weird day. Like I said, I know that's funny, right? I say that like, "Oh, I had a weird thing happen today." Oh, for
For
like
shamans, every
10
day is a
years in a
weird
row.
day.
I was gifted by a group of past magicians who have passed on from this current life, and they showed me, the chakra, and it was red, right? And this is when
Which
I
is not the
was.
right color for a crown chakra,
It is
guys.
not,
Red is
and
the
I
root chakra.
and like they would hold it and they would show me, like how they could weave it, how they can, and then they would hand it to me. I could feel it change, but when I took it back, I couldn't hold it or I couldn't, work it or weave it, right? So it's funny because I just had Reiki done this week and I usually don't get it very often. And for me, what that does is it clears out the crown chakra so I can see clearer, if that makes sense. Because
Mhm.
I operate at a high level. I am taking in information and doing things all of the time. And
Yeah.
even with stillness, like that is a brief reprieve from how I naturally operate. So, like that is why my crown chakra is the way it is. And I think it's also, you were talking about the structure. I think, coming out of addiction and being possessed at one point, these are things that damage the structural integrity of said chakra. And
And they
it's
will. Yeah.
yeah, and it's what I've noticed is the inner work related to that though. It's like it's an imprint, but it's like a groove, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like I see it
The
and it's
habit.
like
Yeah.
right. Yeah. So, like that's one of the things, and I've said it in a few podcasts now why I've been working with Ho'oponopono so much because it takes me out of that loop of going and following that and into just the gratitude and connection with the divine. And slowly by slowly or little by little, I'm noticing things come up in my dreams that are releasing what's holding that loop together. So
Yeah.
yeah, if that makes sense. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a whole process, right?
It is a whole process. It is a whole process.
Understatement of the century. Yeah. Uh, so the the thing that you have to keep in mind when you're doing that level of work is you have to keep in mind that especially at this stage of evolution, and we're going to go back from beginner to advanced now, right? At this stage of evolution, uh you anything that's still there after all the work you've done is something that is almost certainly at the assumption level. It's something that is almost certainly at a level where you haven't questioned it yet, right? It's something you haven't thought to look at. It's something that's stuck down in the assumptions like gravity is going to work, that level of assumption, right? Um, it's something that's at that stage. And so you really have to become an artist of looking at your patterns and seeing how those patterns are reflecting whatever the belief structure is that you're not conscious of. And this is why at this stage it's so important to work with a coach because you can't see this shit yourself. If you could, you would have dealt with it by now, right? It's just like everything has to be seen in reflection. It's like, okay, I've got this pattern. What does this pattern mean? And then you go into your head and your head works down all of these established patterns that you're used to looking for. And then you look based on your own assumptions at all this stuff, but your assumptions are the problem, right?
That's so funny. I got trapped in my head the other day, like 8 rooms in, if that makes sense. Like I was the voice who was looking at the voice, who was looking at the voice, who was looking at the voice. I'm like, oh my God, I've got to get out of here. I don't know if you remember that now.
Yes.
Oh, like, oh no.
But that's the challenge, right? So at this level, you need somebody to give you feedback because, you're in this loop. That's exactly what you were describing. You're in this internal loop. And
It's
so
like spiritual psychosis is how
yeah,
I look at it.
kind of.
It is it's a loop. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so you're in this loop and you're like, I don't know how to get out of this loop. I don't know what's going on. I thought it was this. I thought it was that. I thought it was this other thing. And I went down all those paths and I did all those things and I still feel the same. And it's like, yes, that is when you are dealing with an assumption level issue. And that's when it's most helpful to have outside perspective, because I have different assumptions than you have, right? On any other coach is going to have a different set of assumptions than you have, right? And so, I'm not saying necessarily me, but you need outside help, right?
And this is a valuable time to not be stubborn and to listen to your coach. Don't be stubborn around assumptions.
Yeah, assumptions are tough. So, this is and so when you've got a crown chakra, and this is the other place where doing crown chakra healing can be helpful, is so the energetic world is a reflection of your beliefs and assumptions, right? If you are looking to figure out what is the belief or assumption that is causing the problem for you, then doing energetic work on the issue and clearing that issue in the chakra can sometimes, not all the times, sometimes give, I would say maybe 20, 30% of the time, can give you insight into what the thing is that you're missing, right? That you're like going la 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 to, because it's usually la la la, right? No, I can't hear you. I can't hear you. Fingers in the ears. And so, doing the inner work, looking at the chakra and clearing it, can sometimes bring that up. Now, if it won't move, which is what you experienced, right? And I've experienced that a bunch of times in my life, so you are not alone. If it won't move, then you do need the help from the outside. You do, because it's not going to move, and there's only a 20 or 30% chance it's actually going to give you the answer anyway. So, then you've got to find the assumption to get things to move and to get things to shift. But and let me sort of diagnose this on air so that people can understand how this works, right? So you had a chakra that should be either white or golden, right? And it was showing up red. So it was telling you where the problem was. Problem was root chakra issues, because red is the root chakra. And so the problem was root chakra issues. So safety, security, tribe, whatever, right? Belonging, right? All of those things. And so it's this sense of, base level issues, right? And so, and knowing your past of all the stuff, right? All the stuff, right? So that made it pretty simple to be like, oh, okay, so we're looking at this, so it might be that, it might be this, it might be that, because the color of the chakra gave you an indicator, right? And sometimes the shape of the chakra will give you an indicator. Sometimes, the way that the things are flowing or not flowing. So you've got to look at it again from a metaphorical perspective, right? So this one was a direct mapping. It was super simple. It was supposed to be white or golden, and it was red. Okay, root chakra issues, right? Sometimes it'll be more like interpreting a dream, right? And you'll look for the patterns and the symbols and things in that, and the metaphors in that, right? I see you're getting some insight. Would you like to share with the class?
I've been dreaming of the crown and seeing it everywhere, which I discussed in the class the other day, but I've been seeing the crown symbolism everywhere. So I knew that this was the next piece of the work.
Yeah. And that's what happens too, is that spirit starts to talk to you in various and sundry ways where you just see the same thing over and over again, right? And so that also can be helpful, but that requires being present, right? So if you're in your head and you're not paying attention to the world outside of you, you're going to miss a lot of things.
Question regards to this, because sometimes, not sometimes, a good majority of the time when we're working with clients on an energetic level, it's usually something that, if it happens over and over again, it's something to look at within ourselves. Mm-hmm. So I noticed, would I say crystallized energy that was really hard and stuck in the system, right? And I'm not saying based on that, not possession point, but really like between third eye and crown, more leaning towards crown. And,
as in the back of your head, though.
That's where I felt it, right? Like that, like my clairsentient symbolic library may be different than everybody else's. I just have certain ways that I feel things.
Unlikely.
And yeah, good to know. It did not feel like possession, though. Yes, but back of the head is where I felt it. And what I felt was by the end of the session, it wasn't stuck, but it was like broken loose, but still not moving forward, if that makes sense. It was like,
Yeah.
it's hard to put it into words, but it's like something that was hard to like bubbly. You know what I mean? I don't know if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
I had a little bit of movement to it, but not much. It was
Right.
it
Absolutely.
was broken free from solid, but not moving yet. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, so the back of the head is, I don't have a set symbology for that, but given that it was the back of your head, and it's so you said between third eye and crown, but I feel between possession point and crown.
Yeah. You're right. Right there.
So there's the battle between the centered self, the sovereign self, which is the crown, right? And the possessed self, right? So the victim self, right?
Mhm.
So, that would be the stuck point is between those two things, which I know you've been doing work on. So, yeah, so that's where I would see that. But again, this is the metaphor, right? So this is a perfect example of that because it's like, well, okay, what do those points mean and what do they mean for the person, right? So, there's certain things that just mean things in my metaphysical library, right? And that's how spirit talks to me. It's like this is what they show me, whatever. But then there are things that are more specific to the person, right? So for somebody else, I might interpret that differently. But for you, because of what you're working on and because of the stuff you've been dealing with, this has been a recurring theme for you. And, the victim is a big energy to figure out how to clear in anybody's life, right? It is a big one because it is a major way that we convince ourselves that we're powerless, right? It is essentially our way of telling ourselves that duality is real and that we are not bigger than who we are, as individuals.
And that's one of the things that comes up when I'm making a big transition is, during the ego death, the ego wants to hold on, so it takes me back to the victim. And I'm aware of it now. I'm very much in the observer of that. I'm like, okay, like we're not, we know we can do things. We know we're powerful. We know we are loving and loved. Like so, but it holds on, right?
Yeah.
Like it holds on, and I feel that, and that's yeah. Yeah, that's something I've been aware of, this particular shamanic and ego death. It's very much observed from the outside. I'm like, okay, things are shifting, and they're going to shift when they're meant to because I'm in the feminine, and
Right.
I'm doing the work I can to get there. And I know that it's not sometimes it is, sometimes it's not an overnight fix, and sometimes it's a rewiring, and that's what
Yeah.
the inner work is. So.
Yeah. Well, and Kathy and I were talking the other day, and by the way, for those of you who don't know, Kathy. So if you haven't met Kathy yet on the podcast, you haven't gone far enough back. Okay. But she will be coming back to the podcast soon. She is going to be doing a I don't know, a type of podcast of her own, meaning that she's going to do a episode regularly on this podcast that will be called Taking My Own Advice, where she coaches somebody who needs some coaching and then she takes her own advice that she gave them, right? Because that's how it works in shamanism. But I was talking to Kathy, and if you want to get to know her, she's been in a bunch of podcast episodes. She did the constellation episodes, and she did a lot of the mythology episodes with me. So, you can go back and take a look at those. And but I was talking to her, and she made this very interesting metaphor shift for ego death, which I love because there's this whole thing around ego death and how it's intimidating and dying, ego death, dying, right? It's like this big thing. Well, she said, what if we just thought of the ego as a container that holds our experience? And when we're going through a quote unquote ego death, instead of thinking of it as an ego death, think of it as, you're building a new container and you're transitioning to the new container. That is less intimidating, right? But it's absolutely exactly how I do it today, right? I am absolutely consciously creating the new container that I'm stepping into. And in the process of transitioning from one to the other, I'm releasing the old container, right? And so, sometimes I'm transitioning as I'm building, right? So, because, the experience level of it helps to build it too, right? But absolutely, that's how it's done. And so I love that. I love it so much. I think I'm going to go back and change all the lessons in my programs to reflect that, because it is a far superior metaphor than what I've been using that is standard to the spiritual conversation. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
So, all right. Well, I think we've had the conversation about chakra clearing and healing. And so I think we're going to call it good for today. We will see you next week. And we've got another episode that Elizabeth has talked about to us about. So I think we finally finished all of your suggestions, Elizabeth. So send us some more. And if you guys have suggestions, please send us some, because we would love some more, because it makes life easy for us. And we happily get to give you the answers to whatever questions you have, which is even better than that. So remember to like, subscribe, and share. And remember that what you focus on expands, what you intend is what you create. So choose wisely.